During Infinity War, Thanos proved himself to be a highly capable villain, easily defeating the Hulk in one-on-one combat. He overcame several teams of superheroes who at best slowed him down, but were incapable of stopping him. He accomplished something that most villains are often never able to do. He won. Ultimately, the good guys triumphed in the next movie, but it took every superhero and 4 entire armies to do it. Thanos had spent thousands of years developing his plan and building his forces. His strength and intelligence were useful, but his true power came from the fact that Thanos has a force of will and a conviction unrivaled by anyone in the universe. He knew what he wanted, he believed in it sincerely, and he would stop at nothing to see it done. Unless, of course, we're talking about the clown pretending to be Thanos in episode 2 of the What If series, where somehow T'Challa manages to convince Clown Thanos to give up his lifelong mission after a 5-minute conversation.
Interesting.
Nope, I'm not kidding. Thanos, the Mad Titan who spent thousands of years on his plan, not only abandoned it entirely, but also agreed to work for T'Challa as one of his lackeys after speaking with him for less time than it takes to boil an egg. Now, I know immediately what the excuse is going to be, but it's a What If series. It's supposed to be different. No. Something that's important to note in Marvel and the MCU as the extension of Marvel is that there are things called multiverse constants, where certain characters and objects will behave in the exact same way regardless of what timeline or what universe they are in. Those characters and objects will always behave the same, and Thanos is one of those things. Thanos is considered to be less of a character and more of a force of nature. This means that Thanos will use different methods depending on what timeline and universe he's in, but his goals and the way he behaves will always be the same. It is not possible to convince Thanos to change how he is. There is no exception to this. I really wish I could say that this was the only bad thing that happened with Thanos in the episode, but unfortunately, there's a lot more, and I'll cover that later. The character destruction and the stupidity is really difficult to comprehend. Marvel's What If is bad. Episode 2. The Infinity Stones were the most important and powerful objects in all of the MCU until the Loki show relegated them into useless junk kept in a drawer and used as paperweights. This was done in order to show that the TVA was vastly more powerful than even the Infinity Stones, which is not only absurd, but also undermined the last 10 years of the MCU. Disney did this because they want to have a clean slate moving forward into Phase 4. They explicitly said that they wanted to have the new upcoming stuff be better and more powerful than the previous 10 years, and therefore it became necessary to treat the Infinity Stones as yesterday's trash. Likewise, Disney wants to make way for the new big bad villain, Kang the Conqueror, aka Sean. And in order to do that, the threat of Thanos from other possible timelines needs to be removed, because remember, Phase 4 is all about the multiverse, which means there's an infinite number of Thanoses out there who could all pose a very real threat. But Disney doesn't want to go through that again, and they don't want to use the Infinity Stones either. They want that stuff to be removed off the board because they want to move on to the new stuff.
Class is over, John. Time for something new and improved.
That's why the Infinity Stones were treated like trash, because now you can just dismiss them because, oh, look, there's some other stuff that's way more powerful. And with Thanos, they need to get rid of him. Even though there's many different versions in the multiverse, they need to kind of break down the character and destroy him so that you can dismiss any possibility that he would be coming back and posing a threat. And that's exactly what they did in this episode, where Thanos was reduced to a worthless, bumbling, comic relief side character who no longer poses any kind of a threat, and now can be completely ignored in favor of the new big bad, Kang the Conqueror. I'm certainly not saying that they shouldn't be able to move on to new characters, but there is a way to do that without belittling the last 10 years.
Is that a fact? That's a fact.
Despite the disaster of the previous episode, this one seemed like it had potential, and I figured it would likely be better than the first, but no, it was worse. It was so much worse. One of the major problems with current year movies, TV shows, and comic books is that the writers are more interested in pushing their own agenda or trying to score political points instead of doing what they should be doing, which is telling a good story. This is why we see so many Mary Sues and self-inserts. This episode of What If could best be described as a woke power fantasy in the worst way possible.
You can smell the shit from 5 miles away.
In this episode, T'Challa has become the biggest Mary Sue that I've seen in a very long time. Worse than Captain Marvel, and even worse than Rey Palpatine. He is treated as if he is completely and utterly perfect in every way possible. He has absolutely no flaws, he is the absolute best at everything he does, and he is, without exaggeration, the most popular person in the entire universe.
That sounds extremely egotistical and cringe.
The actor who played T'Challa, Chadwick Boseman, passed away about a year ago. Now, if this character in the episode had been supercharged to perfection as some sort of farewell tribute to him, then at least I could understand that and make an exception. But that's not the case at all, because this episode was written and Chadwick Boseman himself voiced all of the lines long before his death. Furthermore, Chadwick kept his illness a secret, so the writing team in the show that turns T'Challa into a Mary Sue was done in no way as a tribute because they didn't even know that he was sick. What we got was T'Challa being handled with kid gloves in a painfully obvious way, where it was clear the writers refused to include anything that would indicate T'Challa was anything less than an absolutely perfect person. This bizarre behavior, this sort of infantilizing of a black character, is one of the most despicable forms of subtle racism.
Now we'll build a projection machine.
But even ignoring that nonsense, this episode is set up like one of those awful heist movies where things seem to be going bad and then we get a quick flashback with some exposition showing us that everything was actually going according to plan. There was an episode of Rick and Morty that did a good job of making fun of that type of thing. However, this episode of What If doesn't do that. It is genuinely trying to take itself seriously as a heist movie, and it's terrible. I'll talk more about that when we get to it. The episode starts at the same place as the Guardians movie, where Star-Lord is stealing the orb that contains the Power Stone. In the movie, Korath gives the well-known line, "Who?" because no one knows Star-Lord, and it's a joke about Peter Quill believing himself to be more famous than he actually is. However, in the show, Korath instantly recognizes T'Challa as Star-Lord and immediately is starstruck. It's incredibly over the top, and it doesn't even end with Korath. Every single character in the show, including the bad guys, not only know exactly who T'Challa Star-Lord is, but act as if he is the best, most amazing person to ever live.
You serious?
It's incredibly obvious what the writers on the show are trying to do. They want to attribute the differences and the success of this version of Star-Lord to be entirely based on the color of the character, and it makes perfect sense in their soy-damaged minds now that Star-Lord is black.
If you don't like this, you are a bigot.
But don't worry, it gets worse. Korath quite literally kneels before T'Challa and begs to be allowed to join his crew, but T'Challa says that he doesn't have room, so the two of them end up fighting. But the whole time, Korath is concerned only about actually hurting T'Challa, and even when Korath is defeated, he's happy and smiling about the mere opportunity of being in the presence of T'Challa. That is how ridiculous this is. It is so over the top, it's sickening. After the fight, T'Challa has second thoughts and brings Korath along anyways. Yondu uses his arrow to take out a bunch of soldiers outside, and then they leave the planet. We get a flashback where we learn how the mix-up happened. Instead of Yondu going to Earth himself to pick up Peter Quill, he sent some of his men who messed it up and grabbed T'Challa instead. Yondu is upset because clearly it's the wrong kid, but don't worry, it gets worse. The whole point of these missions was to return the children to Ego, so if Yondu wanted to get paid, then he would have to go back to Earth to pick up Peter Quill, and at the same time, he would return T'Challa. In the movie, Yondu had a change of heart and decided not to deliver Peter Quill, but even if Yondu had already made that decision and he didn't want to bring Peter Quill over to Ego, there's still absolutely no reason and no situation where it makes sense for him to keep T'Challa on the ship.
And that is the whole problem with aliens, is you just can't trust them.
Something else important to point out is the necklace T'Challa is wearing. Later in the episode, we see that it's made from vibranium, and we can see from the flashback that it appears to be his father's necklace. So how exactly is adult T'Challa wearing this necklace if he hasn't gone back to Earth, and he very clearly didn't have it when he first left? Additionally, we know for a fact that it's T'Challa's father's necklace, because later on in the episode when we see T'Challa's father, he no longer has the necklace, which means despite T'Challa and Yondu never going back to Earth, somehow T'Challa's father's necklace magically appears with adult T'Challa. Of course, the necklace turns out to be an incredibly important plot device not once but several times later on. So T'Challa simply having the necklace, despite the fact that he shouldn't, drastically changes the outcome of the story.
It's very convenient.
Very convenient.
In present day, the entire crew is meeting at a bar where T'Challa is again celebrated by everyone as the best ever. And I keep pointing this out because it happens so many times throughout the episode. It's on the nose and it's ridiculous. It's here that we're reintroduced to Thanos, who gives us the painfully stupid explanation that he was willing to give up his plan that he had worked on for over 1,000 years just because T'Challa said it was a bad idea. But don't worry, it gets worse. It's at this point the episode truly begins to take form, and that shape is of an incredibly stupid heist movie. They even include the absurd, typical heist movie music. The plan is to go and make a fake trade with the Collector in order to steal some green goop that's capable of generating massive amounts of plant life.
But Brondo's got what plants crave.
It's got electrolyte.
T'Challa agrees to go and get this because he can use it to seed planets and solve universe hunger. Because solving world hunger apparently isn't good enough, T'Challa is so amazing that he is going to solve the hunger problem for the entire universe.
Right.
The crew arrives at the Collector's base, and T'Challa manages to sneak past the main security because Thanos and some of the others create a fake fight as a distraction, which causes Proxima Midnight to try to go and stop it, which she does single-handedly, and she also manages to take down Thanos with a single attack. What's worse is that the attack doesn't even hit Thanos directly, but rather goes into the ground. We are supposed to believe that Thanos, the Mad Titan, the guy that could mop the floor with the Hulk and defeated the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy by himself, was taken out by one hit from a character that struggled to fight Black Widow.
What? No.
Meanwhile, T'Challa's been going through the base and comes across a prison unit with Howard the Duck. T'Challa shoots the locking mechanism, which opens the door, freeing Howard, because of course the fucking Collector of all people would for some reason choose to not have an alarm system on any of these units. Are you fucking kidding me? Howard shows T'Challa where to go, and suddenly T'Challa's necklace begins glowing. You know, the necklace that he shouldn't have. It starts glowing because the plot needs it to happen. One of the spaceships the Collector owns came from Wakanda. T'Challa's father had sent it out in order to track him down, and from this, T'Challa learns that his father is still alive and Wakanda still exists, even though Yondu had told him that it had been destroyed. However, Nebula betrays T'Challa as she owed a debt to the Collector, and T'Challa was the payment. T'Challa and Yondu are brought to a large cell where the rest of the crew is being held, and T'Challa gets angry with Yondu for lying to him about Wakanda being destroyed, but then Corvus Glaive shows up because the Collector now wants to speak with T'Challa, even though he was just with him not even a few seconds ago. For some reason, Corvus Glaive then proceeds to knock out T'Challa, and he does it like this. Now let's pause this for a second and just take a look at this image. Look at the weapon that Corvus Glaive is using. If he was to hit T'Challa with this, what do you think would happen? And no, it's not him getting knocked out. He would get impaled. But if you think about it, it's even dumber than that, because there was no reason for T'Challa to even be brought to this large cell. We just heard that the Collector wants to talk to him, even though he was literally right next to him just a few seconds ago before being brought to the large cell. And Corvus Glaive is going to take T'Challa and place him into one of those smaller individual containment unit cell things. So why wasn't T'Challa just immediately brought to the individual cell thing where the Collector could continue talking to him while he was right next to him? But no, that didn't happen because the plot needed T'Challa to have a conversation with Yondu and get angry at him in order to move the story along, which is really dumb. Sure, Yondu needed to be brought to the large cell, but T'Challa never should have even been there. It's stupid. These things might seem like small details, but the reason why I point them out is to draw attention to the fact that the people making this show simply don't care. Not just for this, but for many things throughout this episode and the entire series. Another quick example is the weird floaty glasses from the space bar that get reused at the end of the episode when everyone is on Earth in Wakanda. There's a lack of attention to detail combined with sheer laziness. Speaking of attention to detail, T'Challa now wakes up inside the individual container thing and has a conversation with the Collector, and it should be pointed out that T'Challa is still wearing his necklace that the Collector can very clearly see, which is going to be important in just a minute. Meanwhile, Nebulous and Corvus Glaive arrive at the larger cell again for some reason with the rest of the crew, and Nebula turns on Corvus and kills him. It's then revealed in nauseating heist movie fashion that this was all part of the plan to clear out Nebula's debt and to steal the green stuff that makes the plants grow.
The Brondo's got what plants crave. It's got electrolytes.
So I've mentioned a couple of times why the heist movie thing is so dumb, and let's quickly go over that heist movie gimmick. The heist movie flashback trick is generally considered to be an unsatisfying way to resolve a situation because normally characters will encounter a problem and then they must figure a way out of it. The heist movie flashback trick reveals that everything that has happened up until that point was part of the plan all along. It's kind of the same situation that we had in the Loki series with this idiot right here. Because of the gimmick, we learn the characters had never been in any real danger. As a result, the tension and suspense is entirely wiped away, and the audience is left feeling as if it had been deceived. A good mystery story will plant all the clues throughout, so attentive viewers will be able to figure it out before the big reveal. However, the heist movie flashback gimmick doesn't give any of the clues until after the reveal, so the viewer is never able to figure it out beforehand, regardless of whether they were paying attention or not. And what we get is a very unsatisfying way to resolve an issue. Back with T'Challa, his plan to escape is to use his vibranium necklace to break the glass. Remember, just moments ago, the Collector had seen T'Challa several times and even had a conversation with him. Vibranium is an incredibly rare and valuable metal. The Collector specializes in rare and valuable objects. There is absolutely no way the Collector would not have instantly recognized the necklace as being made of vibranium. And if the Collector had known that T'Challa was wearing a vibranium necklace, for what possible reason would the Collector have let him keep it, knowing that it would be able to smash through the glass enclosure?
I blame myself.
So do I.
I want to drive this point home as much as I possibly can. When T'Challa is locked up inside his individual containment cell, he still has his weapons. So the fact that he has the vibranium in order to break through the glass isn't even necessary because he could just shoot it.
I barely have a reason to care, and even I noticed.
I suppose it's too much to ask for the writers to pay attention to their own story. Regardless, T'Challa has broken out, and he now gets into a fight with the Collector, who he really shouldn't have any chance against in any way, because this version of the Collector is quite powerful. He managed to acquire Thor's hammer, and as well as the helmet and the Necro Sword of Hela, so he was able to defeat them in one way or another. He also has a bunch of other equipment. So this Collector is incredibly powerful, and T'Challa wouldn't have a chance at all, but he manages to hold his own for a little while. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew are running to the ship, and Thanos tells the others to go ahead, and he will stay behind to deal with everyone that's chasing them. And at this point, Nebula says something unbelievably stupid. She says, "Are you crazy? You'll never take them yourself."
She's the smartest person I've ever met.
What are you talking about? Even without the Infinity Stones, Thanos is one of the most dangerous characters in all of Marvel. However, because this episode has turned him into a clown, after the fight begins, Thanos immediately proceeds to get his ass kicked. But just before Thanos is killed by his former lackeys, Nebula returns to save the day. She effortlessly defeats both members of the Black Order, because fucking of course.
Everything woke turns to shit.
At the same time, Yondu joins T'Challa, and the two of them manage to steal the Collector's bracelet and trap him in one of the cells. Then the entire crew leaves his base. After that, T'Challa returns to Earth and reunites with his family. We also get to see that Peter Quill is working as a janitor as a fast food place, and he gets a visit from his father, Ego, and that's the end. And all of this is just entirely awful. This episode took me a little longer to make because I was working on video improvements like the book animation you saw earlier, as well as finding and creating over 100 new drop-in clips in order to add some variety. My intent going forward is to release 2 videos a week. but they do take a significant amount of effort to create, and at the moment this channel is not monetized, so I don't get anything from these videos. However, if you would like to support this channel and get some rewards, I've set up both a Patreon and a Subscribe Star. The links for those are down below. I'm also working on creating some t-shirt designs that I think you guys will like. But for now, that's the end of episode 2.